Welcome to the Maryland Caucus. I'm Dave Whelan, the executive editor of the Spy newspapers, and this is a Spy podcast where veteran Maryland political analysts Len Foxwell and Clayton Mitchell break down the politics, policies, and personalities shaping our state and region each week. And a warm welcome to you both. Len, good morning.
Hey, good morning, Dave.
Last week, Maryland Matters ran a article that hinted that Jake Day, the very popular mayor from Salisbury, and now with the Wes Moore administration and housing and development secretary, is hinting that he may run and take on Andy Harris. And this is kind of big news for the first district. As you know, both of you know, this first district has been almost engineered to be a Republican safe seat, which Andy Harris has taken advantage of several election cycles. What do you make of that?
Well, Dave, first of all, Jake Day is a dear friend of mine. I've known him for a very long time. He is not just a highly capable politician with a unique ability to appeal to people, but he's also a public servant who is in government for the right reasons. So I'm a huge fan of Jake's, and I have been for a long time. Having said that, it's an uphill climb. And you said it. This is a district that is genetically engineered to benefit the Republicans. We did this to ourselves, and by we, I mean my own party. We created a Republican ghetto in the first congressional district so that we could maximize our congressional advantage from 6-2 to 7-1. And the only way to achieve that while satisfying the prerogatives and requests of the various House incumbents from Maryland was to pack as many Republicans into the first district as possible. So we have a district that by a roughly 57,000 vote margin benefits the Republicans. And what's even more discouraging if I'm Jake Day, coming from the lower Eastern Shore, and that's where my personal and my professional base is that a majority of the votes in the first congressional district come not from the Eastern Shore, as I think a lot of people erroneously believe, but from the I-95 corridor counties of Baltimore, Hartford, and Cecil. And that's where Andy Harris gets most of his votes on election day. When he defeated Heather Mazier in 2022, 55% of his vote total came from those three jurisdictions. And 2 years later, 57% came from Baltimore, Hartford, and Cecil. Mm-hmm. So those three counties are really the impenetrable nut that Jake's going to have to focus on if he's going to be successful in this campaign. And anything is possible in politics, but it is going to be an uphill climb.
When Clay, Andy Harris has said in the past he was only going to serve 2 terms. He changed his mind on that, but he's been in office for a long time. And even with the Republican majority, I think a lot of people thought that he would be much higher in the Trump orbit that he is. Do you feel like, you could expect him to run again and that Jake Day's threat would not be significant?
I think Jake Day is a competent guy. He's an intelligent guy. He did great things down in Salisbury. He's also doing a great job for Governor Moore as secretary. Notwithstanding all that, not how it matter if he's a great guy, an intelligent guy, I don't think the politics are there for him. The closest anyone ever got from the Democratic side to Andy Harris last time was Heather Mazier, who got 43% of the vote. I think that's the ceiling. Andy Harris promised that he'd only run 2 terms, but now he's the chairman of the Freedom Caucus, and I think he's got a taste for Washington now. And the electorate here on the shore, for better for worse, is extremely conservative. I'm among the conservative members here on the shore, and I don't see a path to victory for anyone else, even in a primary against him. I don't think anybody like a Wayne Gilchrist could beat him in a primary. I think it's his job for life as long as he wants it, as long as the lines are drawn, gerrymandered like they were the last time. Len's correct about the Democratic Party drew these lines. They put all the Republicans they could on one district, and that's the way the ball bounces. I don't think he can have anybody challenge him that has a possibility of winning.
Do you see a way in which Andy Harris would just give up the seat to go into the Trump administration?
Possibly. I think if he got director of National Institute of Health or something like that, something that's down his lane that could be of value to the Trump administration, I think he would. But as right now, I don't see an indication that that's going to happen. The Freedom Caucus has some members that were hesitant and did not vote along with the president on his budget reconciliation a month or so ago, and they may have trouble coming up with a big, beautiful bill with them. For that reason, I think that President Trump doesn't have an interest in putting any of those members in a position of authority within the administration.
You know, switching topics, Len, we also concluded a legislative session in Annapolis a couple of weeks ago, and it was a challenging time, I think, for the Democrats, particularly Wes Moore. How do you think Wes Moore and his team came out of that session?
I don't think it was a particularly good session for the Democratic Party. I don't think it was a particularly good session for Governor Moore. You know, I teach a class in public communications over at the Johns Hopkins University, and one of the principles that I teach is that of the empty glass theory, in which every political situation is embodied by an empty glass. And either you can fill that glass with your narrative and tell your story first and tell it yourself, or you can leave it to others to do it for you. And my concern for Governor Moore, putting the substance of the session away and what happened with the budget, is that he has voluntarily or otherwise surrendered control of the glass to his would-be political opponents. So the Democratic Party, and by extension the Moore administration, as the one who submits the budget, is being associated with higher taxes, with higher fees, with more spending. And I think the sum total of it, despite the fact that he did get some wins, I mean, he put together a historic transportation package, more than $500 million for better roads and bridges and transit. And, you know, he did a couple of other good things, but now the message, the primary message coming out of this General Assembly is that the Democrats raised our taxes, the Democrats raised our fees. And in so doing, he has let Governor Hogan, our former Maryland governor, still exceedingly popular despite his unsuccessful Senate race, let him back into the political ball game. And the last thing you want to do in politics is give oxygen to your would-be political opposition, and that is what has happened. On another point, Dave, or I should say to that point, I do think that while a lot of good came out of the governor's overseas trip to Japan and South Korea, I would have ideally liked to have seen that trip happen maybe a month later, so that coming out of the legislative session, he could have traveled through the state, hitting all 5 principal regions of Maryland to share his message and to highlight some of the investments that the state and his administration have made in schools, in safety, in capital bond bills, and et cetera. This is the time when governors have the chance to tell their side of the story. And my concern is that he left that opportunity on the table by leaving the country so close after the bell ring to close out the session.
Clay, usually the opposite party takes advantage of this in creating a narrative, but we have a very fractured Republican Party in Maryland. The governor's popularity numbers are still very high.
They're high, but as of the last session, I think the last Gonzalez poll showed that they're trending down, although they're still pretty high. They're not at Larry Hogan's level of 72%, but they're certainly very high. The session, I agree with Len, has damaged the Democratic brand and the governor. The oxygen left in the room is starting to deplete, and I don't think on the Republican side they have a center of gravity The Democrats have Wes Moore, Adrian Jones, and Bill Ferguson. That's the party. Those are the leaders. If we have a Larry Hogan or a Bob Ehrlich run again, we're just recycling the past. I don't think that's a winner. We have rising stars like Senate Minority Leader, my Senator Steve Hershey, who I don't know if it's his time yet, and I don't think he has the gravitas to raise the millions of dollars it's going to take to win. However, on the Democratic Party side, I think there's a fissure going up the middle. There's rumors that Ed Hale may run as a blue dog Democrat against Wes Moore. I think that should be more problematic to the governor than a Republican running. Certainly, a blue dog Democrat like we used to have on the shore can cause him some real problems, especially pointing out to the problems during session. The energy problems that we have, the high cost of living and taxes, and our just notwithstanding Kerwin, our educational problems, they're severe. So I think he's got more problems from the Democratic side than the Republican side this time.
Len, finishing up, we had an interesting election yesterday, in Easton. Don Abbatiello had a striking victory over the incumbent Frank Gonzalez, who was very well supported by the Republican Party in Talbot County. Any thoughts?
Sure. Well, first of all, I'm overjoyed. I've known Don for 15 years. I worked with him as a volunteer in Easton Little League back in the day when our kids were young and just starting out. And you can learn an awful lot about a person when you're volunteering in the trenches of a local organization like that and carrying a bag of helmets and bats around in cold and rainy weather and everything else. I'm very reluctant to draw any macro conclusions from a local race because every municipal election is idiosyncratic, right? So they're fought on distinctly local issues, local personalities. There's a greater degree of local awareness of the candidates because the candidates come from within our own communities. But what I will say is that we did have an unprecedented level of community engagement in this election, and that was reflected in a historic level of voter turnout. And so I'm heartened by the fact that people who may be dissatisfied with what's happening at the national level, with the political dysfunction, the breakdown of our government, the threats to democracy, everything else, I am heartened by the fact that people do see local government as a way where they can make a difference. A couple hundred votes, one way or another, can make all the difference in the world. And so the exercise of participating in our local elections, it can be very empowering and gratifying. And in this case, I think the town of Easton got it right. They elected three people, a Democrat, an independent, and a traditional Main Street Republican, all of whom ran as fiscally responsible, public safety oriented, good government types. And I think they collectively, Elmer Davis, Bob Rankin, and Don Abbatiello, I think they reflect a town that is becoming more of a purple community within a purple county. And so their candidacies were of the moment. I think Frank Gonzalez was arguably the most supremely unqualified person to ever hold elected office in the town of Easton. And I'm glad that we can now reference his political career in the past tense.
Clay, I know in Queen Anne's County you're not following Easton or Talbot politics as closely as Len, but this was kind of an extraordinary election that we had yesterday. What are your takeaways?
Well, local politics, in my view, is less partisan than national politics or statewide politics because policies that affect everyone can be set. However, local governments can have more effect over your life than Washington can. I met a couple of the candidates at a talk that Len gave in Easton a month or so ago, and found them to be very capable, very intelligent men. That they won their elections. The people in Easton spoke by a wide margin. And I think as long as there is competent leadership and management over the local budget, they're going to be fine. I think that the candidates are very capable, and obviously the voters of Easton spoke, and I have nothing bad to say about any of them. I think that Easton's in good hands.
Well, Len Foxwell, Clayton Mitchell, thanks so much. We will see you next week.